Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Today, I take utmost pleasure to have this opportunity to welcome you all on Children's Day for this momentous occasion of the launch of Climate Educators Network. So happy Children's Day to you all. Today's event marks a new chapter in our collective movement against climate change. The Climate Educators Network, as you all might have heard by now, embodies the spirit of collaboration and knowledge sharing. It is a platform that brings together educators, both formal and informal, researchers, policymakers, and activists, all dedicated to nurturing a generation of environmentally conscious citizens. By joining forces, we surely hope to create a rippling effect, spreading the climate awareness and understanding. Together, we can inspire, foster innovation, and shape a sustainable future for us. This evening, we are honored to have important climate figures with us and who has dedicated their lives to climate and environment advocacy and education. Their presence here with us today itself underscores the significance of this mission that we are on and serves as a beacon of hope for the work that lies ahead. So now let me take you through some of the things that we are planned for this session. First, Jay Warrior, also a member of Climate Educator Network, will introduce himself and the eminent panelists today, followed by a very exciting panel discussion that we have kept, after which Sunaina Ganguly will introduce us to this website that we are launching today. She will take us through the details of the website, emphasizing on the resources that one can access and also the way that one can get involved with this network. After this, we will have an open forum discussion, and that will be not only for the panelists, but also for the CEN members that are present today to answer your questions. And this will be then followed by the concluding remarks. I would like to now hand it over to Jay Warrior to introduce himself and to the eminent panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanti. Good evening, everyone. We're so glad to have you join us for the launch of the Climate Educators Network. I am Jay Warrior, one of the co-founders of the Initiative for Climate Action, a nonprofit based in Bangalore and one of the institutional partners of the Climate Educators Network. Our keen interest has been to enable climate education and leadership for transformative and systemic climate action. Along with fellow partners and collaborators, we are responding to questions like, how may we inform and inspire many different kinds of stakeholders about climate problems, their causes, and the solutions? How may we enable and equip droves of individuals to take ownership and lead climate action in their own households, communities, and organizations? And how may we support educators, like many of you present here today, especially those in formal institutes, to learn, share, and teach climate in their classrooms? We invite all of you to join us in discovering the responses to these and many more questions, because we can only truly make an impact when we take everyone along in this journey. We are privileged to have a panel of esteemed individuals who have made remarkable contributions in their respective domains. Today, as we launch the Climate Educators Network, we are honored to be in the company of visionaries who have dedicated their careers to creating positive change. First on our panel is a trailblazer in the world of technology and sustainable development. Mr. Sam Pitroda is an internationally respected development thinker, policymaker, inventor, and entrepreneur who has spent over 55 years in development of telecom. Credited with having laid the foundation of India's technology and telecommunications revolution in the 1980s, Mr. Pitroda has been a leading campaigner to help bridge the global digital divide. Mr. Pitroda also served as the chairman of the National Knowledge Commission and advisor to the Indian Prime Minister with a cabinet minister's rank. He was also chairman of the National Innovation Council, Smart Grid Task Force, Railway Modernization, and Public Broadcast Reform. As an architect of India's telecom revolution and a champion for technology-driven sustainable solutions, Mr. Pitroda's insights promise to be enlightening as we explore the intersection of technology and climate education. Thanks for being here, Mr. Pitroda. Our next distinguished panelist, Ms. K.K. Shailaja, teacher, actually worked as a high school's physics teacher before entering politics. She has been a beacon of leadership in the field of public health, steering Kerala through several health crises, including COVID-19, with grace and efficacy. Recognized globally for her exemplary work as the former Health Minister of Kerala, Ms. Shailaja's strategic approach to public health challenges has set a standard for crisis management. As we venture into the realm of climate education, we're honored to have you, Ms. Shailaja, with us, and we eagerly await to hear your perspectives on the intersection of health, education, and climate awareness. Moving on to our next panelist, a dynamic force in the landscape of sustainability, Mr. Aaditya Thackeray brings a fresh perspective to our panel. As a young leader, he has been unwavering in his commitment to environmental causes, advocating for policies that foster a greener and more sustainable future, most notably championing the ban on single-use plastics across Maharashtra. Through his efforts, Mr. Thackeray seeks to strike a balance between rapid urban development and environmental conservation. Mr. Thackeray's passion for environmental stewardship aligns perfectly with the goals of the Climate Educators Network. Today, we look forward to gaining insights from his experiences and understanding how the youth can be catalysts for positive change in climate education. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Thackeray. Our next panelist, Swati Thiyagarajan, is a multi-award-winning conservation journalist, documentary filmmaker, and author, renowned for her pioneering work at NDTV, where she served for over 20 years as an environment reporter and editor. She broke new grounds with the show Born Wild. This groundbreaking program, the first of its kind in Indian television, was also the world's first wildlife show led by an all-women crew in the field. Swati is the author of Born Wild, Journey into the Wild Hearts of India and Africa, and has been instrumental in NDTV's flagship environmental campaigns. Currently with the Sea Change project in Cape Town, she contributes to the conservation of the great African sea forest through science-based storytelling. As a trailblazer for women in wildlife television, Swati brings a wealth of experience, including her role as associate producer of the award-winning documentary My Octopus Teacher. Her commitment to elevating indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and community participation makes her insights invaluable as we launch the Climate Educators Network. Thanks for joining us, Swati. Our last panelist is Dr. Rahul Chopra. He's the director of the Center for Sustainability, Environment, and Climate Change at Flame University in India and an associate professor of environmental studies. He is also the project director of a global climate change education project of the International Union of Biological Sciences that aims to integrate climate change education in curriculums across the world. His interests are multidisciplinary and include curriculum development, the use of satellite-derived remote sensing and in-situ data to evaluate our changing environment, historical GIS, field-based geological and environmental studies, and the use of high-resolution chemical analysis instruments and data to study various earth and environmental processes. Thanks, Rahul, for joining us. We're thrilled to have you all here and look forward to hearing your invaluable insights around climate education. Now, I'd like to hand it over to you, Mr. Pitroda, to share your insights. Mr. Sam Pitroda, can you unmute and share your camera?
To do that. Can you see me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can see you and hear you fine now.
Thank you. Thank you. Greetings from Chicago. It is indeed a special honor and privilege for me to be here this morning, my morning, your evening, to talk a little bit about climate change. I want to thank Jay, Nimi, and others for giving me this opportunity. And this is perhaps the right time, mainly because of the work I have been doing on ChatGPT, to really talk about climate change and related education in new light. We all know that climate change is here and real. The impact of climate change is seen everywhere in all different forms. Some very obvious and some not very obvious. Every day you hear about some new incidences connected to climate change. It came here all of a sudden in last 25, 30 years. I remember the first major meeting in Brazil. And in last 25 years, 30 years, what we have done is not enough. We need new thinking, new approach to climate awareness, education, understanding, appreciation, and at the end, some action. I go to many meetings where people talk about climate change, but the action coming out of those conversations don't speak aloud. And unfortunately, things remain where it is. And at times it is frustrating. Climate change is about mindset. It is about education. It is about technology adaptation. It is more about economy and governance. Unfortunately, in the world today, a lot of focus is given to power and profit and not to planet and people. Unless and until we begin to shift our mindset to planet and people away from power and profit, I don't see much happening. Climate change is a very complex subject which requires great deal of understanding of diversity, distributed development, and a totally different approach and new thinking that we haven't had for quite some time. About 3-4 years ago, I wrote a book on redesigning the world, because I firmly believe that the design of the world today that was created just about the time when I was born. I was born in 1942 in British Raj. That design, which created UN, IMF, World Bank, ultimately WHO, WTO, that design was essentially based on democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. That design is obsolete. In a hyper-connected world, you need a totally new design. Unless and until we create a new design, which is more focused on inclusion, sustainability, non-violence, new economy, and basic human needs, a lot of these challenges will remain on the table for a long time to come. I'm big advocate on technology and hyperconnectivity, partly because of my background, my work. And I believe hyperconnectivity has a huge role to play in climate control, because hyperconnectivity is all about democratization of knowledge. It is about decentralization of decision making. And it is also about demonetization of services. It is about content, context, and it is about all kinds of communication. So how do we use this to really create new awareness on climate change? I believe we need a lot more focus on social media. We need a lot more focus on ChatGPT. Today, climate change has a different meaning to me. You go look at ChatGPT and see the questions you need to ask and the answers you get. And I have tried it. It is absolutely amazing. So it doesn't make sense to go back to a normal way of teaching people, normal way of connecting them, because that can go on. I'm not saying this is the only answer. In the diversity of knowledge, information exchange, today, technology and tools must play a much larger role. Much more so than it has. I have seen very little comparatively on climate change on many of the existing social media, whether it is TikTok or it is Facebook or you name it. What is there is very static. I worry about climate change a great deal because my grandparents gave me a world which was poor, simple, but clean. I could breathe in city of Delhi 70 years ago, 80 years ago. I'm giving to my children a world that is richer, complex, but polluted. Look at what is going on in Delhi and Mumbai and other cities of India. What climate control are we talking when we can't even breathe? And I just don't understand why we have not been able to address fundamental challenge related to clean air, clean water, sanitation. Look at all the mountains of garbage around major cities in India. Technology is here. Political will is lacking to address these problems. So at a global level, there is a lack of political will on climate control. At a national level, there is a lack of political will to address climate issues. We all can talk at our level, but unless and until there is political will, domain expertise, it is very difficult to initiate change. So finally, I wish you all the best. I want to compliment you for taking the initiative. And I think it's high time that young people really shake things up on climate change. And the biggest tool you have is hyperconnectivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pitroda, for sharing those invaluable insights. I think the relation of talking about the poor, simple and clean versus the richer and complex and more polluted is a very valid analogy. And also looking at redesigning the world. And along those lines, I'd like to invite, all right, that's your book as well. Awesome. Thanks for sharing so much. I think lots of valuable insights and more to hear from you. But now I'd like to hand it over to Ms. KK Shailaja, teacher, to share her insights regarding climate education. Over to you, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Respected personalities who are participating in this discussion, dear brothers and sisters, First of all, I want to congratulate the team who are behind this very good task, the formation of Climate Educators Network. We are discussing the most important issue or subject of the contemporary world, the climate change and the existence of this world, this globe itself. And I think it is too late to think about the climate change globally. So many summits were over, as Sam Pitroda ji said. So many summits were over. But I didn't think practically more things had happened here. Summits were over, everything is in papers, but practical activity, there is a lack of such kind of activity. Pitroda ji very correctly mentioned the picture about the climate change and the issues. And I think the wealthy countries, we are all saying that, are responsible for the climate change, these catastrophic challenges happening throughout the world. But the carbon emission or that kind of thing. But they are not spending money to tackle the problem, tackle the issue. Some kinds of assurance they are giving in these summits, but they are not spending money or giving any technology to solve the problem throughout the globe. And now also they are behind the profit-making business. They are threatening the globe, making some changes in the natural things. And as a health, I was health minister for 5 years, and I directly found how this climate change is affecting health sector globally and in our country also. You all know the pollution, air pollution, water pollution, and earth, land pollution, everything affects the health of the human being, not only human being, the whole living beings, and it affects more. Human beings are more vulnerable on these issues. I'm from Kerala, and as you all know, Kerala is a very beautiful place, lots of rivers and mountains, etc. Greeneries are there, and very beautiful. But we are, I think we are more vulnerable in this matter, catastrophic changes that happening here. Last 5 years, while I was minister, I faced so many difficulties out of this. Nipah virus occurred here. COVID-19 virus, about 3 years we are suffering on that issue. And two devastating floods were the 2018 and 2019. And all these are affecting the health of the people directly. Why these are occurring here? We always thought about, we studied about that. Kerala is a place where human development index is high in health sector. Maternal mortality rate is too low, and child mortality rate is too low, and health system is public health system is very efficient here. But the non-communicable diseases and the infectious diseases are occurring here. Why Nipah came here? We studied that. Because of these issues like deforestation and also the population growth and agricultural work, how much extent we can go, we should have to study that. People are living very near to the wildlife now. Forest. Nipah occurred near a forest called Janagikad. And these bats are there. And this virus is coming from this virus. Virus as one kind of fruit-eating virus is the natural carrier of Nipah virus. And when they got excited or disturbed, this quantity of the virus increased in their bodies, and they spill over this virus outside, and human beings got this virus from this. And it was killer virus, and you know how we suffered much to tackle the problem. We closed that place and traced, quarantined, isolated, treated, etc. We started some policy or protocol and operating procedures, etc. But that protocol and that operating procedure That was very great. Now we are thinking so because that was a great experience. Every crisis give us some experiences also, and some model or some kind of model to follow to tackle this problem. Now we are not afraid of this Nipah virus because we are sure that we have some kind of procedures to contain this thing, to stop the spread of the virus. But it is coming, not only Nipah. Occasionally, different things are coming. After the floods, we are all afraid that after the floods, these leptospirosis will occur and cholera or diarrhea, that kind of things also occur. Anyway, all these challenges, these natural calamities and these catastrophic changes are directly affecting or impacting the health sector also. So we have to study about that. We have to prepare early, and we have to raise the health system capacity threshold to tackle this thing or to make the system above this kind of threat. And we are doing that thing. We are preparing for that thing. And not explaining everything. All these and see these non-communicable diseases are also due to climate change. Air pollution. The people are suffering from COPD. In Kerala also, the chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases are the cancer is also rampant here also, and these are coming from the pollutions. Definitely, we can say so. The Delhi Pitroda pointed out that thing. This time, government asked them to stop the fireworks there, but people are not agreeing. People are not aware. I think people are not aware. In Delhi, the poor children are getting these chronic pulmonary diseases, respiratory infections and diseases. They are dying. But they are not ready to stop the fireworks there. Not that is a small thing, these fireworks, but the big business. That is the actual reason for the pollution. We should find out that. And I'm not elaborating.
Sorry, Ms. Shailaja, just a last minute. If you
Yes,
can
yes.
please
Okay,
wrap
okay.
up.
I'm concluding. We should have
All
to
right.
study and propagate these things.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Shailaja, for sharing that. I think a very important linkage between the natural environment and human health and actually building the capacity for that. And I think a lot of students also learning the linkage between climate and health is the need of the hour. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. Now, may I invite Mr. Aaditya Thackeray to please share his thoughts?
Thank you, Jay, and thank you to everyone on the panel. It's great to see all of you here, especially when you call anyone for a Zoom call nowadays. I think it just reminds you of the COVID times, and also to see Shailaji out here, it just reminds us of all those times of 2020 and 2019. But a very Shubh Deepavali to everyone. I think it's very crucial for us to be speaking about what we are doing today, in terms of environment, in terms of climate action, because like my two earlier people said, Samji said or Shailaji said, that we've been speaking a lot about it. Now what next? What is the action that we want? We've been feeling it, we've been seeing it, we've been speaking about it. I've been personally to COP earlier, may go this time. There's a lot of talk happening at summits, but what about climate action? I think action will only come on two levels. One is, of course, us as individuals, and the other one that has to come about is global policy action in terms of larger corporates, larger governments, federal governments, all of us, when we start firstly recognizing that climate change is here, and two, acting on it. At all of these summits, to be honest, I keep hearing this debate of the global north and the global south, and whether the global north is doing something, whether they should be doing something. Then there are talks about carbon credits and green funds. All of it is there. None of us really know how to tap into it or when to tap into it. I think what is crucial for us as the global south, or especially as India with 1.3 billion population, to realize that a country like ours, which is a union of states, we have a mind-blowing geography, we have a huge diversity of population with each different dialect, culture, tradition, places we stay in, maybe on the hills, maybe in the central India, maybe around the coastal line. All of that, we need to realize that our economic strata and our geography and our placement in the world makes us the most vulnerable country in the world to climate change today. We are on this threshold of development. We're on this threshold of whether we move upwards or we move south. But the point really is, what kind of development are we looking forward to? Are we looking only forward to concrete roads and glass buildings, or are we looking towards a better standard of living that is given to many cities around the world? Now, if you look at most of the ideology that is put into design thinking today, when we speak about cities or urban or rural areas, cities and rural areas, both villages, the development today for most politicians is maybe a 6-lane highway, maybe an underpass, an overpass, a multi-layered tunnel, and 50 layers of God knows what. The idea is, where are we going towards? Are these modes of communication going to take you faster to the hospital or to your home and to your places of work? And I say this not as a hyperbole in terms of hospital, but today, frankly, what are we facing? If you look at the past 3, 4, 5 years and check the news in May, many of our schools are shut because of heat waves. Maybe Andhra, Telangana, Delhi, some parts of Maharashtra, we have to shut down our schools for heat waves. For past decades, and it's ever increasing now, especially when you look at cities like Mumbai and other cities, Chennai and cities like that, our rainfall days are getting lesser and lesser. For example, Mumbai used to get rains on something like 120 days. It's coming down to about 70 days. But the volume of rains is actually multiplying into God knows what. And waterlogging happens overnight today. And the incidents of waterlogging are increasing. If you look at the agricultural sector also, when you move towards the rural side, you have rainfall sometimes in January, thunderstorms in March, you have hailstorms sometime. Basically monsoons, which is supposed to be the real finance minister of India. It's said that the monsoons are the real finance minister of India because of the way it helps our crops and the water dependent cities. These monsoon patterns are changing today. And I believe now it's come to a point where, when I was speaking of the RA forest as someone who was 28, 29 years old back then, thinking about my present and my future, a lot of my friends in journalism actually told me that they don't speak on environment. It's not going to get you votes. It's not really something that people are going to vote on. Today, the biggest difference I see is a lot of people, young, old, middle-aged, everyone from every socioeconomic strata are facing the brunt of climate change and realizing the need of climate action. What is missing today really is people in responsible places largely recognizing that today we're in the midst of a climate emergency. And again, by saying climate emergency, I don't really want to add to the panic, because sometimes panic takes us into the wrong direction or takes us to extreme steps. We need to think all of our steps out, but development has to be sustainable. Do you really need to cut a 2-hour road to something which is 20 minutes? Do you really need to actually bridge a gap between two places where you already have a smaller road to go, if it is safe for the people to go? I think these are some of the things that we need to start looking at. I remember my climate journey actually started way back when I was in the 9th standard. There was a movie called The Day After Tomorrow. And my school had taken me to watch it. And back then, The Day After Tomorrow really thought of to be something like, all of us as kids, we thought it to be something like, 50 years down the line, 100 years down the line. Now, when you realize and see the world around you, we've acted as catalysts. The human race has really acted as catalysts, and we've increased the speed to such a point that it's no longer day after tomorrow, it's today. Even during COVID times, the government of Maharashtra had to spend 2 billion, almost 14,000 rupees on compensation to farmers. And we have to give our compensation. They're due for that. But then why was the compensation needed? Only because there was a climate-related disaster in our fields. Every year, like I said, either hailstorms, droughts, floods in the same areas. We need to start thinking about climate-resilient agriculture. We need to start thinking about climate-resilient cities. We need to start thinking about climate-resilient transport and industries and adaptation. But we need to start thinking now. We should have started yesterday. But I think it's not too late, because I think we are a story of ambition. And if we choose to do it, we need to start off today. Just to conclude on a small point, I think I would love to thank all of you at ASAR that you are starting off with the Climate Educators Network, because again, like I said, for us, what is important is to go right to the roots, the grassroots, and inform the kids, girls, boys, that what is happening today, and need to see and hear from them what their vision is. Too often as political parties, political thoughts, all of us are engaged in fighting over the past. I think we need to start thinking of the future, what we can offer to that. And the last part that I would really want to give a personal example is, be it fitness or be it anything. Sometimes this happens that when your parents tell you to eat green vegetables or behave in a certain way, you don't end up doing that because you're the rebel in the house. But when your teacher tells you to do that, or your PT teacher or your coach tells you to do that, you obviously follow it 100%. So when we go to schools, I think that will be the part of success. So thank you once again for having us over on this, and wishing you all luck and all support to this initiative.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aaditya Thackeray, for sharing that. I think some very valuable insights, and I think even youth frustration of really demanding that action, because there is a lot of conversations, I think all the speakers have talked about the fact that there are a lot of global conversations, including COP, that's just coming up. And I think a very interesting point regarding the fact that the day after tomorrow, or a movie or a film actually trigger that kind of climate journey for you and for many people that we've spoken to, actually. And I think that is a good introduction to our next speaker, Ms. Swati Thiyagarajan. And if I may just request all the attendees, if you have any questions for the panelists, we will be taking them up after this panel discussion. So please drop them in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. Yeah, over to you, Ms. Thiyagarajan.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so, we often talk about leaving a better world for our children. We also need to be asking ourselves, what kind of children are we leaving for the world? Because they are going to be the custodians of this planet. So, that brings us to very much the central reason for this whole panel, which is the education part of it. So Yale University had done a survey sometime last year, and it was the statistics were quite alarming, and this was in India. So about 9% of the respondents of the survey said that they knew quite a lot about climate change and they were very concerned. 32% of the respondents said they knew something about climate change. Yes, they were concerned, but they weren't quite sure about, how to express that concern or how much to be concerned. And then there was over 35% of respondents for whom it didn't seem to be on their radar much at all. So this is not good right now in the situation that we're in, considering we're in 2023, and after all of the COPs and all of the talk, and especially the sort of climate emergency conversation that's happened, and even Antonio Guterres, the head of UN, saying that no longer are we in the era of global warming, we're in the era of global boiling. And this year we're going to have a COP 28, I think. So that's 28 years of talking without much action. So when you really look at all of that, the question is, where and how can we really help in this space of education to get our children, when they emerge as adults, that they can make informed choices and decisions? And for me, there are three things that I think in this climate change conversation, it just completely gets lost. So there's one, that's climate change. And the only thing the whole world seems to be looking at when it comes to climate change seems to be carbon, as if that's the only problem. Yes, carbon emissions are a huge problem. And yes, they are responsible for the increase in global average and mean temperatures. No one is disputing that. But that is one thing that is happening. Biodiversity loss that we're facing on the planet, across the planet, practically on the doorstep of the sixth mass extinction, that is something I do not see linked very well to this climate conversation. And along with that, in that picture, what else is not talked about is oceans. So if someone were to ask me, what would I like to see in 5 years, education around climate in India is, number one, I'd like it to become mainstream, not an elective, not like some airy-fairy subject that you do on the side that gains you your 90% mark or you choose it. No, mainstream. Because everything that we're teaching our children, all of the subjects that they're forced to study and get marks in, they're all linked to climate, be it math, be it biology, chemistry, physics, English, what have you. Because your entire world right now is linked to this biosphere that is keeping you alive. So if we don't link the entire picture in climate change, which is your carbon with your biodiversity, and especially the oceans. The oceans, forget climate change, the oceans are what run your entire weather system on this planet. In the entire COP last year, COP 27, of a 186-page document, I think one page, or there were 3 mentions of the word ocean. what are we talking about in these conferences if we're not discussing biodiversity and climate change? Yes, there is a COP for biodiversity, but that's separate. It comes later in the year. It barely gets the level of media coverage that, you know, the other COPs get. So these are incredibly problematic situations. And I would like to, in 5 years, to see it become mainstream in Indian education. I would like to see all of these subjects become part of it. And then, you know, a organization like yours, which is so interlinked to, you know, all of the stakeholders. I mean, there are policymakers, there are conservationists, there are NGOs working in the sector. You know, I really need to see a link between our education system and all of these organizations, because it has to be done in a concerted way. You need guest lecturers to come in, you need experts to come in, you need people who know what's happening to talk, you need policymakers to come in to listen to the children, you need storytellers to come in so you can break down all of this heavy information in a way that the children can understand. And it has to be part of their mainstream education so that they see it as a viable sort of focus for the future. And even if they don't go into the space of climate or conservation, they need to know that everything that they will do as the future CEOs, as the future policymakers, as the future adults who step out into this world, that they need to have all of this information. And the only way to get that is to bring all of the stakeholders together. And a wonderful organization like yours, you know, the Climate Educator Network, you're poised in an excellent space, like just like how you brought us together on this panel, because you're connected to all these various networks to be able to bring everybody together, to be able to, you know, work with the schools and tell them if this becomes part of mainstream, you know, who you can bring, how you can bring it, what can be done, and how this information can be disseminated. And as Mr. Pitroda said, you know, you have all of this hyperconnectivity. You have today this, you know, you can say, okay, there is a digital divide. And of course there is, that is something, you know, the world needs to work on. But even a little bit of Wi-Fi and a phone, you can get a lot of information across. You know, and as Shailaja teacher said so clearly, you know, health so intrinsically linked with what's happening to our biosphere. And as Aaditya said, you know, having politicians to put aside a lot of the petty politics that come in the way of doing something that is actually really important to save lives, and really in a big way to connect this. And for me, one of the things that is key in this is because, you know, we think we make decisions based on facts that we are given, but actually studies show that we are like icebergs. The tip of the iceberg is where the logic comes in, and we think that's what's made the decision for us. But it's actually the rest of the iceberg, which is our emotions, that's actually making us make the decisions we make. And for that, we need to connect to nature. We need deep nature connection brought in. And with all of this together, this is how I'd like to see our education kind of move in 5 years.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thiyagarajan, for sharing your perspectives. I think the importance of one, definitely the oceans, and then also your point on storytelling and the role that that has in mainstreaming climate education is very valid. Thank you so much for sharing those perspectives. Now, can I call Dr. Rahul Chopra to please share his thoughts?
If you don't mind, I'll just share my screen and show you a brief presentation. Can you all see my screen? Hear me fine?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so thanks very much. You know, what I'd like to do today is actually address the audience today, which are my tribe, which is teachers, and to actually, you know, get down to brass tacks and say, if we are an educator and we are in the formal education system, what can we do? My fellow panelists, and certainly they are well known, have talked a lot about, you know, the need for climate action. So what I want to demonstrate with a project that I've been working on for a few years now is, what are we actually doing? How teachers can be change makers? And how do we go about addressing this climate crisis through education and educators as change makers itself? So everyone here is pretty clear that this is the most significant issue of our time. This is one which would affect the sustainable, equitable development of all countries and their citizens. And I'm saying this with a lot of thought put into these words, Some of us are better coped to handle the impacts of it. That's a socio-economic sort of issue. But eventually, we want to get to climate solutions. And the first step, the critical first step towards climate solutions is that the population has to be aware of this issue. I'm saying aware. And who has to be aware in this population? The current and the future generation of learners, because they will face the brunt of climate change. When I teach my class, I start by apologizing on behalf of my generation and previous generation. But essentially, our goal is to make people aware of this particular issue. Now, how do we go about increasing this climate change awareness when the syllabi of almost all countries do not have climate change meaningfully? This is what Swati just mentioned. Even if climate change is taught, and you can take the example of the UGC right now, it is, if we follow the model curriculum, which is from 2001, it is only included in a geography curriculum. Suppose we go ahead and through policy level interventions do make a change in syllabi. It will take time. And where are the teachers and how equipped are they to actually teach climate change should it come about? Now, this is not limited to India or the developing or underdeveloped world. Many parts of the developed world, which we've gone and studied the curriculum across the world, do not have climate change meaningfully. So you introduce climate change in an earth sciences curriculum, in a geography curriculum, you're going to reach only those who will take that major. Hardly a very tiny population of the formal education system. So our project, which is called TROPICSU, stands for Transdisciplinary Research-Oriented Pedagogy for Improving Climate Studies and Understanding, aims to increase climate awareness through educators and education systems, specifically the formal education systems, keeping in mind that the teacher is the change maker. So what do we want to do? And this picks up on what Swati was just saying, is that we want to bring or put together a suite of resources that bring climate education into the mainstream education system, integrate it into the topics of high school and college curriculum, certainly. The idea is not to make it into a standalone curriculum. So can I teach particular topics in particular disciplines using climate-related examples? This solves many problems. The roadblock, which is saying that the teacher is not a climate expert. A humanities teacher is not a climate expert. But he or she could teach grammar, let's say, using a climate text as opposed to the outdated Wren and Martin I was exposed to. A teacher in math can teach, algebra, or can teach differentiation, integration using carbon dioxide emission data. He or she is teaching topic in their discipline using a climate example. The student is learning things from a multidisciplinary perspective in order to understand climate from all dimensions. As was mentioned earlier on, these are things which are not linked to one topic alone. It spans all curriculum, all topics in all disciplines across the ages. So what we've put together is about 800 free educational resources for teachers to integrate climate education with their subjects in 10 disciplines. And these are with what we call teaching tools and lesson plans, leveraging technology, which Mr. Pitroda talked about. Where we are different is we've also gone through a very strict, stringent sort of process of peer review, where the science is first sort of checked by climate experts. And all of this is useless unless the teachers themselves use it. So we've gone and conducted workshops, and about 1,000 teachers from 11 different countries have given their feedback. Our disciplines include all the sciences: biology, chemistry, earth sciences. That was easy. We had a lot of fun trying, putting together resources in the humanities and social sciences. And we think these teachers are going to play a critical role in this warming, uncertain world. The humanities teachers, the social sciences teachers, kids who are taking these subjects have to make sense of this slightly crazy world which we are leaving our kids with. So what we have is, and this is just one example of one discipline, the various topics which can be taught with a climate example, whether it is pandemics, which Ms. Shailaja just talked about, or epidemiology, human health, infectious disease, biodiversity, evolution, all of these have a link to climate change. So why not use this vehicle to talk about climate change in your classroom? You don't need to be an expert in climate change. You can link it through our resources itself. Now, we are not the experts in every single sort of subject and every discipline, but the global experts, which Mr. Pitroda talked about, the hyper-connected, interconnected world, these resources are out there. They might be research-oriented, they might be for a public cause. We put them together in a lesson plan which can be used in the formal education system. Here's a simple example. I won't go into any details, but to say, if you're a math teacher teaching calculus, can you do so using carbon dioxide emission data? So we give you all of this for free. There are learning outcomes listed. For those who need help, we have a step-by-step user guide where each different resource is described. There are questions you can ask, additional resources that you can refer to, and of course the credits which are made by the experts of the world. So under one platform, if I give you the Nobel laureate in economics talking about climate change as a learning resource, a kid in a rural part of the world who normally doesn't have access to this is now getting access to quality educational material. We are democratizing knowledge. We are making quality climate education material accessible to all through this. Now, we know that learning is most effective in your own location, your own context. So we put together a lesson plan of climate impacts in every country of the world, 192 of them. Resources in your languages. For the benefit of our panelists, I've put together black body radiation of physics, which is in Marathi, climate change stories, to try to make it a little more personal so that people can engage with this topic, whether it is on, we have stories from all parts of the world and for India in different states as well. Now, finally, this is for the teachers, and we hope it becomes by the teachers too, which means what? We want them to become content creators. So the restriction of a textbook prescribed by your education system, can we move beyond that? Can we have a lesson plan? And all one is asking for is one lesson plan per teacher. Can we do this? So we've conducted workshops in 11 countries, trained close to 1,000 teachers. But most critically in this slide is we've managed to get about 60 odd lesson plans to be written by the teachers. What is important to them? They know their context, they know their student, they have their stories. So this is in a nutshell our project. It was seeded by the International Union of Biological Sciences. We have a host of partners of different science unions and a bunch of national science academies, including the Indian National Science Academy. And we are very happy and proud to be associated with the Climate Educators Network also. And we hope we can use this network to reach out to more teachers. So my request to the audience and my tribe, as I'm calling them, the teachers, is partner with us, because we want to take climate change to every classroom. All our resources are free. Our workshops that we conduct are for free. And we want you to become a content creator, to take this to your students, your context, and help train the next generation of students. One final request, and I'll stop here, is for those who have a little more say in policy level matters. You know, I know that education is a state subject, and so we are also looking to see how can we go ahead and create state-specific educational resources for India, such that it can be sort of incorporated into the classroom. What we've done is bottom-up, where you're training the teacher, putting the resources together. What we need is for some policy level intervention for it to grow beyond us and for it to genuinely go to every sort of student in every part of the country, certainly, if not the world. So with that, I'll end here. And of course, congratulate all my partners and the Climate Educators Network. I have great sort of hope that it'll grow and it'll, you know, end up sort of taking this to every part of the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rahul, and to all the panelists for sharing your views. I think it's been a very diverse panel in itself, and we've got some very interesting perspectives. Just to sum up, I think a couple of key points that I took away regarding this and regarding climate education. I think the key piece is the intersectionality of it. Climate is no longer just about, say, carbon or looking at one aspect of climate change. It's really about looking at things like biodiversity, like health, like cities, and even things like technology. And I think another key piece is regarding, say, the pedagogy of going beyond textbooks. I think what Rahul just mentioned, and looking at various, mediums of communicating and educating, including storytelling, including the use of different means of technologies. And finally, I think everyone is talking about how can we make it really practical and contextual. It's not just about kind of at a global level, but how do we ensure that people in every household, in every community can actually practice this in their own space. With that, I would like to hand it over to Sunena Ganguly to take us through the Climate Educators Network website, which hopes to address some of these challenges that have been mentioned, and including resources like Tropicsu as well. Over to you, Sunena.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you very much to all our panelists for all their diverse viewpoints on this, and also to our audience. We're kind of in the halfway mark just before we get into the real discussions from the panelists that we will have in the next segment. So just before that, I thought we could run through the entire website that we put together, and the website will be going live as of this moment. So we're very happy to kind of announce that it is now accessible to anyone who needs it. And the idea, as we have been reiterating, is to connect between communities, educators. We don't think of educators loosely as people in formal education. We believe that all of us are educators in different ways in our communities, as individuals, as people who contribute to resources and building other kinds of worlds for people. So we invite you all, of course, to be a member and a part of this community. Our website design, may I just walk you through it a little bit, is we have tried to keep it kind of low on emissions. So it is a carbon it's a low emission website. And while looking for actually a no carbon website, we found out that in India, those hosting services are not possible. So that is a possible space for people in IT to get involved. The website itself has a few concise sections. We don't want to confuse people with too much information. The main part are the resources. So here we can walk through a little bit about who we are, the kind of members we are. At the bottom of the website, we will always have spotlights of what our next events are, and also spotlights of the resources that we will see in a different section. We kind of thought that we wanted to keep some elements of play, because play to us is important as a value in education and any kind of exploration. So these are all the tabs that you can kind of play around with. And they also link to different sections of the website if you need to go to. There's also a drop-down menu on the side where you will see a little bit about us, members, events, resources, and also ways to get involved. We are also on YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram. So please feel free to follow us if you don't want to visit the website all the time. Very briefly, in the About section, we tell you a bit about what our ideas have been so far, a little bit about how holistically we are thinking about climate education, our vision, our mission, and a bit about the history of the kind of events that we've done. Thanks to the generous support of Azim Premji University, the last few years, we've been working closely with them and putting together offline and online events. So we're able to standardize and format it according to the requirements, and actually depending on COVID and all of these other kind of exigencies that we don't really have control over. In the members section, at the moment, we have two different categories of members, which are the founders and the anchoring members. And we have institutional partners. Echo Network and the Pune Climate Warriors are our newest members on board. So we would like to welcome them as well. And the idea is that we will start growing out with lots of different networks in order exactly to bridge the kind of conversation that we're having today, bridge the divide between formal and informal, community and individual, global and local, and really find out what the action elements are where people want to get involved. Our events section, very, very briefly, will tell you a bit about what our past events have been and also events that are coming up. The main part of the website, which we think will be useful to most people, is really the resources section, of which, as Rahul mentioned, Tropic Zoo is one big resource. At the moment, the resources are easily navigable and clickable from here. They will be between international and national. And I would kind of encourage you all to kind of go through that space and explore the kind of resources that are already there. And also, if you all have resources that you want to contribute to this section, we're most happy to host it. So please do get in touch with us, which brings me to the next section, which is really about how you can get involved. And here, I guess my call to action is that we really are starting out this network. We are thinking through the ways that we will collaborate and co-create. We are thinking about the kinds of programs we want to seed, what kind of programs are already running that can be scaled up. So if you all, any of you all want to get in touch with us about ideas, you want to develop content for Tropic Zoo or for us, you want to become a general member, you want to be part of our meetings and think through some of the ideas that we are developing and designing for, or if you want to become a resource person. For example, if there is a college that needs a resource person on a specific subject, they will be able to dip into this pool and ask you to give a guest lecture perhaps, or conduct a workshop. So there are many, many ways that we're trying to kind of design these buckets for as many people to get involved as they can. And we really urge you to please do come write to us. There's a very simple form that you can fill out, or contact us on any of our social media channels. So I will stop with that. I hope that that this is useful and will be a useful resource for all of you going forward. Thank you. Over to you, Jay.
Thank you, Sunena, for walking us through the CEN website. And that website is live now for everyone to view. I think, Sunena, you can stop sharing your screen and we can allow all the participants to please explore in your own time, and please share it with anyone who you feel this would be relevant for. And just to reiterate that this network is a growing network, so we're very much looking forward to having lots more participants, and it's not just meant for educators, even though educators is in the name. We are looking for people across various kind of organizations and communities, and including resident welfare associations. So feel free to reach out and we'd be happy to see how we can support you with relevant climate knowledge. All right, now we are getting to the final section of this discussion. And we have had loads of interesting questions come in from the attendees. Maybe we can start with one. This, I believe, would be directed to you, Rahul, regarding how can we inform and allow teachers themselves to appreciate that climate change and climate education is an important subject. So maybe you can share your experience and we can open it out to other panelists as well. So how do you inform and realize when teachers need to appreciate that climate education is something that they need to take up?
Yeah,
So
I
it's-
think, of course, you know, step one is to get to the teachers, because we consider them the change makers. How do we reach out to them is, I think, what we do through things like our small networks, which are growing, but, how much will it grow and where will it go? Are we just talking to, the converted already? So how do we go to those we haven't traditionally reached out to, or even we are not comfortable with? So I do believe that there are systems, at least in India, the teachers training program, at least for higher education, that is mandated for all teachers to do a refresher course in teacher training. If policy level decisions could be made where, there's a little push to say that why not think about climate change education, maybe those sort of courses would help us sort of go to, much larger sort of audiences. And of course, again, I don't have those networks, but ministries of education, either at the state level or national level, could be the sort of way in which we reach out to many, many more educators, just sort of explain to them the idea that this is important. And then how to do it, I think, is where the roadblocks always arise. Hopefully our network is something which would help them get to that.
Thanks, Rahul. Any of the other panelists want to respond to that? All right, no worries, we'll move on. I think another interesting question has come from Madeline from C-STEP. She's talking about an initiative which is looking at bringing together artists and scientists to talk about climate issues. And they're also looking at offering a fellowship to help students create climate art with mentorships with various artists. So maybe this is directed at you, Ms. Thiyagarajan. What has been your experience or some positive stories of art and that really inspiring, climate action? Sorry, I think you're on mute.
Okay, yeah. So we all know that through history, if anything has brought about change, galvanized people, created revolutions, caused lasting change, it's been art, literature, poetry, painting, storytelling. And I come from a space of where my art is really storytelling. And I think this is so key because humans are hardwired to listen to stories. Because right now, the story that has ascendancy, in a sense, is about how much money you can make, how well established you are in this sort of neo-capitalist system, how much can you have, how much, the more you consume, the happier you are. These are very, very strong stories that have been told over and over and over. And that's sort of embedded somewhere, even in a subconscious way, where we think that we're failures if we don't have these big jobs and these big salaries and accomplish something. And I think this can only, the counteract to that is really art, in a sense, because art really asks you the question of what is price and what is value. So let me quickly talk about, in terms of economics, I think in the 1800s, there was this very interesting point that was made, which was the diamond water paradox. Essentially what that was when I buy water, it's really cheap because I have to drink it. It keeps me alive. You can't charge an arm and a leg for it. But when I buy a diamond, I pay a lot for that diamond. But the big question is, so the diamond can have a price, let's say it's 1 lakh, and a bottle of water, let's say, is like 20 rupees or 10 rupees or whatever. So that's the price. But what is the value of that bottle of water and that diamond? That bottle of water, that's your life. I mean, it's keeping you alive. So the value is literally incalculable. That diamond, what's the value? It's really nothing. It's a story that's been told you about that diamond that, has actually given it value. So this is a very interesting thing about this diamond water paradox. And that is something I think economics made a straight, like a full-on run away from that paradox and went down the pricing system as opposed to looking at value. And I think value is where art comes in, because there's a way of looking at the world around you and speaking to the truth of what it is that we as humans actually feel, what we as humans actually live for. You think about it. I mean, it's our relationships, it's the friendships that we make, it's the families that we build, it's the qualities that we bring into our life ultimately that makes us thrive, not the job and the money and all of it, because ultimately you're working, 18 hours a day to make the money, and maybe you get a week's holiday at the end of the year. But these narratives are strong narratives. So in my telling, really, how do we tell the stories that change that mindset? Like, how do we bring this to the people to go, wait a minute, it's this biosphere that is keeping you alive. You need, no matter who you are, where you live, how much technology you use, you need food to eat, you need water to drink, and you need air to breathe. That's indisputable because you're a carbon-based life form on this planet. So I personally think that the counterweight sort of to this other narrative of this, just the economy and money and all of it is very much art. And I think storytelling, painting, discussion, very, very key in this, in a way of disseminating this information around climate change.
Thank you, Ms. Thiyagarajan, for sharing that. I think even Mr. Aaditya Thackeray talked about the role of a film that actually triggered off those thoughts and that inquiry into what actually is happening with climate and making those connections with oneself. So thanks for sharing those insights. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. We have one from Shannon Olson. I'll just read it out. There are two levels of education here, educational curricula in schools that should provide climate information and adult and community education. These are generally discussed as separate issues, but of course they are inherently related. She would be interested to hear from the panelists on examples of mechanisms to mutually increase both levels of education amongst Indian communities. And maybe I can add on another type of education, which is for policymakers and government representatives and local leaders as well. So what in the panelists' view has been useful examples where, this climate education has really played out. Maybe Mr. Thackeray, you can start that response.
Thank you. I think two crucial things. One is, like you said, for schools and formal education, right? I remember actually building with the UNICEF a syllabus that was particularly for our schools from 1st standard to 8th standard. It was in English, and we were also making it into Marathi, Hindi, and many other languages, because the BMC education, really, the Mumbai municipal schools teach in 9 languages. So we were looking at all 9 languages, and it wasn't the typical EVS that we had during our school times. It has to be evolved, because EVS back then was knowledge of our environment, say in the 80s and the 90s. Today, it has changed. The environment around us has changed. Our cityscape has changed. I think we need to be more adaptive to that. And also what we were indulging in was making go into the outdoors, let them step out to the outdoors. Because back in my school, I remember we had 2-3 programs. One was the Nature Club by World Wildlife Foundation. And we had some more which took us actually for hikes, treks, taking us to jungles, taking us to RA colony, feel, nature around us, observe the butterflies, observe flowers, observe, try to see where leopards could be hiding. So I think giving them a real feel of what you are living and what you are coming from, I think that is very, very crucial. Some of our initiatives that were started off in school, I don't know if the syllabus is still on or it's defunded and taken out of the school program now. But the other thing we were starting off with was Vaghuba clubs. Basically, Vaghuba is to do with the Vag, which is a tiger, and you add the suffix ba to anything that you think of as godly or with respect. The Vaghuba clubs were exactly nature clubs, taking school children, be it from the 3rd, 4th, 5th standard, out to smaller trips across the city. And you don't need to take them to the jungle. Take them to your school garden, take them to a playground nearby, take them to a small municipal park nearby, and let them just make observations of the birds you see, the plants, the trees, the type of mud. I think that is very, very crucial. All of us as kids have played on mud playgrounds. We've seen earthworms, we've seen snails. Today on artificial turfs, how many snails and what biodiversity would you see? So I think that is very, very crucial. And the other one, of course, which comes to say, once you've graduated or once you've already stepped into the professional world, I think that is where the big corporates and government policies play a huge part. We had created this Maharashtra Council of Climate Change, which I strongly believe should also become an institution for the country. Just like we have the GST Council, we should have an Environment Council where all climate-related issues are spoken about, because going further in the next 5 or 7 years, the Environment and Climate Change Department will be one of the most important departments in all countries. You look at what is happening today. Tons of migration, war, civil strife, everything happening over natural resources or access to natural resources. And this is only going to increase for the peace and stability, for our economy, for our development.
for social harmony, we're going to need environment department to be very, very crucial. And a structure like the Maharashtra Council of Climate Change, where you work with relevant departments. Today, the environment department is working in silos. We're only focusing on giving permissions to industries or to projects. Why aren't we coordinating with the agriculture department or the urban development or rural development department? Why not with the irrigation department? I think this is when you start interlinking other issues with environment. If you start working with industries, with educators, with colleges, with schools, today, if you look at, I think someone made a point where tomorrow's CEOs or today's CEOs are also going to deal with climate-related emergencies, right? When you've got to give holidays for a flash flood or a heat wave, you are dealing as a CEO with your economic resources, your work to be done, and a climate-related emergency. And I believe that till we don't put our minds to make profit out of climate, the world will not move towards it, because finally the world also needs to earn. I'll give you a small example with what we had with the BST. The BST buses today are almost 3,500 running across the Mumbai city and suburbs, of course, a huge network. Our aim was to take it to almost 10,000 electric buses. Almost 1,000 of them would be double-deck electric buses. But what was very crucial is, with diesel buses, the cost for us per kilometer was 32 rupees. With CNG buses, it came down to about 21 or 22 rupees. With electric buses, it's coming to 9 rupees a kilometer. And over the next 3 years, had our plan been on track, the current regime is again moved away from that. But had our plan been on track, the BST would have been a surplus making public transport service in India. So I think we need to look at how we can support life and livelihood through environment. And the fact of the matter is, you may be a left-thinking person, a right-thinking person, a centrist, but environment is not going to leave you. Climate action has to be on the forefront of your agenda, be it through whatever purpose or perspective you see it through. So I think that is where we can all work together.
Thanks, Mr. Thackeray. Swati or Rahul, would you want to respond to that as well?
Well, yeah, so I think Aaditya made some really strong points there. And I think that, really, I think the conversation we're looking at, and I think Rahul also in his wonderful presentation where he spoke about speaking to the teachers, I think it's looking at it, in that integrative way, because seriously looking at it as a silo is what's constantly going to land us in a soup. This entire climate conversation, policy and politics is only looking at carbon. And therefore, because they're looking at carbon, it's even by carbon credits and, carbon this and carbon that, and everything that's happening is happening around carbons. Even our clean energy, what we're calling our green energy. The problem there is, as someone who works in oceans, I can tell you my biggest challenge in the next decade is going to be to stop deep ocean mining. And the reason big companies are coming in and investing billions and billions of dollars and trying to get policymakers, especially the International Seabed Authority, to give them permission to go and mine our deep sea. And when I say mine our deep sea, I'm not talking about it 100 meters or 200 meters. I am talking the Hadal zone and the Twilight zone and all of it, which is 700, 800, 1,000, 2,000 meters deep and even deeper. We have no knowledge of this space. We have less knowledge of the space than we do of the moon and Mars, but yet they want to mine this. Why? To get rare metals, which will go into the batteries that will run your green, your vehicles. How is this green anymore? How is this renewable anymore? So it's only because we're thinking of carbon and sequestering carbon that yes, fossil fuels. I'm not saying that's bad. All I'm saying is if we thought of it in lines of carbon and biodiversity and oceans, we'd be coming up with a different way to create these batteries and not have to be looking at this whole argument around should we mine the deep sea. So these are very, very important and crucial things that we have to be looking at. And it really starts at the education level, because if it becomes integrated and it becomes part of a child's education from when they're very young, and as Aaditya also said, to be taken out into nature, to make that deep nature connection brings about a certain empathy. It changes the way you think. And you need to see it in this holistic fashion. You need to see the bigger picture so you can actually keep coming up with solutions that don't then create tomorrow's problem. Let's sequester all of the carbon. Let's come up with technology that does that. And we're still going to be in a soup because we're going to have utter biodiversity collapse. Then what are we going to do? Right? So this is the thing. we need to start looking at it in a way more holistic fashion. And as Aaditya said, definitely the Environment Council, Environment Department to not just be giving permissions, but to actually be a bastion for the environment and looking at all of these issues and seeing how we can move forward.
Thanks, Ms. Thiyagarajan, for sharing that. I think we will move ahead into looking at a couple of questions which are talking about training the youth and the sarpanch on climate issues. And I think it's very much related to this last question of seeing how do we kind of educate not just students, but educate policymakers and local governance as well. So maybe again, this is to all panelists to see what can we do, or what are some examples of that you can share of really supporting local climate education, or how do we localize climate education and make it relevant? If you have some thoughts on that.
Can I go for that one?
Yeah, please.
I think it's crucial for us as policymakers to be thinking of this, because today, see, we had the Paris summit, we had COP26, COP27, now we're heading to a COP28. There's a lot of talk happening at the global levels where governments are committing, and are we really following up on what our commitments are? Yes, there might be difficulties in following up, that is one thing, but to willfully not follow it, you also have today a global conversation where you have climate deniers part of a presidential race in the United States. Today is also coincidentally the birthday of King Charles, who started off with this whole conversation of climate change and sustainability in the United Kingdom back then. But today, if you see, a lot of our governments across the world, be it at a federal level or at a national level, are rolling back on their commitments. And then, like Swati ji said, there are some who are focusing on the moon and trying to mine moon for materials there. Some are focusing on the oceans. And what we're really losing out on is the focus of where we come from and where we originate from. We don't realize that we are a very vulnerable species. We may have survived as the fittest till now, but just like the dinosaurs were eradicated in one go, there might be a point where the rest of the world will move on without the human race. And that was a near threat during COVID. We thought when the world was without planes flying in the sky, when the world was without traffic on the roads, the human race's footprint was at its bare minimal. I think that is what we need to realize, be it sarpanches, be it chief ministers, be it prime ministers, be it national leaders and statesmen. What is important is where we stand today and where we can go. Often as governments, we face these choices where there is populism versus environment. And populism in the sense of whether extend a runway, saying, look, I'm going to bring flights to your district now. Or do you support a place where it's actually, grassland, where GIB, a great Indian bustard, is the lone survivor? I think what would be important is to go back to our roots and see whether we can protect the biodiversity. My brother is actually into research of wildlife and new species. And the feedback I get from him today is the way, we are facing a real danger in our forests, in our, the way speciation is happening ahead. I think the human race is the only race that is not really realizing what we are doing to the world today. The birds and animals may adapt, may evolve. Are we evolving, and are we indulging in better practices? We feel that if we have a good home, which everyone should have, which protects us from thunderstorms and rainfall and lightning, we're safe. We're not safe because finally the world is vulnerable when the human race is vulnerable. I think that is what we need to think. What we are today is a dot in the universe. And but our impact that is negative can be huge on ourselves. So we need to start working, be it a sarpanch level or a global level. It is important.
Thanks, Mr. Thackeray, for sharing that. Another question, maybe targeted at you as well, would be, and would like to hear the rest of the panelists' thoughts on this, is regarding some of the innovative financial planning ideas that you can think of for climate education. I think one aspect is ensuring that there are resources, there's teacher training available, but is there also access to finance and funding that's coming in? And I also see some questions regarding utilizing CSR funding or things like that. So if the panelists can share their thoughts on that.
Jay, I mean, I don't see anyone, so probably I'll just.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
It's crucial because in a time of COVID, when you had to buy a mask, did you think of finance? It's about a survival. And today, the only way to do this is to make environmental education or climate action education a part of our mainstream education, be it at a primary level, middle school program, or colleges. It has to be part of the syllabus, like you have math or a language or history or geography. I think that is very important. And the second thing is we have to move out from just books and a classroom experience to real nature-based experience. In a world where we're looking at nature-based solutions for most of the climate problems that we have today, we have to interact with nature. Till our school kids don't go out to the farm fields, they're not going to understand where your tomatoes or your carrots or your potatoes are coming from. And once they start planting those in their own backyards of the school or their homes or cities, that's where the real interaction will happen. We've lost touch with nature, to be honest, especially in cities.
It is a major financial question, I mean, it starts at a global level and it comes down to a local level as well. The reason for that, I'm saying that is because, okay, first let's look at the whole, the COP and all of it. And for the last 5 years, the biggest debate has been how much is the global North going to pay the global South for being the historic emitters? Valid argument, that I have nothing against that argument. And I think it's, it should be made and there should be a responsibility, but they were meant to have come up with this climate fund. They're meant to have established this climate fund, and they're meant to be dispersing these climate funds. That's not happening. At a local level in India, I live in Cape Town and I come back to India and I see statues that have come up, which have cost, the country 20,000 crores and, ridiculous numbers like that. I can't understand that because just that much would be enough to revamp the entire education system, not just children. As someone brought up, you could do adult education, you could do all of your sarpanches, you could really speak to people at a policy level. You could have done so much. So it's a priority thing as well. So I don't think it's a lack of money. I think the money is there. It just comes down to where do we think is the priority in which we're going to put this money. And unfortunately, I think, again, this comes back down to what is it that somebody holds as important or as dear, or what do they see as a focus for them to be able to redirect this money in that way. I mean, as a person working for a conservation organization, the Sea Change Project, I don't know if this is the case with a lot of organizations, but it's still not easy to go out there and get funding. When you try and explain to people, there's the kelp forest that's there in Cape Town, and this is a very biodiverse forest. And unless there's some sort of flashy moonshot type thing where you can literally say that, this much is going to be the bang for your buck, in a sense, it's hard to sell it. So, you have to work within that capitalist system, even as a NGO or not-for-profit, to try and raise the money. So I think, why is that? What is it about the fact that we can put millions, literally millions, into sports, for example, whether it's cricket or whether it's soccer or, whatever it is that is the national sport of a country. It could be the poorest country in the world, and a lot of money will go into those resources. Again, this is not a question of either or. I'm not saying, we shouldn't have sports and we should do environment. I'm just saying money is found when there is a priority. Money is found when there is a focus. Money is found when people realize, okay, there's something here that, will bring the economy, make the economy greater, or I don't know, whatever the reason might be. But when it comes to environment, yes, of course, we're also looking at livelihoods and all of it. But just keeping people alive, I think, should be a huge priority. I'm not understanding why there's any debate around this. And we know we're in a situation today, just this year in India, horrific floods. I have never seen the kinds of things I saw in Himachal and, in the Northeast and other places. I mean, all of the landslides that are happening, the wildfires, I mean, all of this is happening because, forests have been cut down, floodplains have been taken over with construction. It's just ridiculous. And this is why I keep coming back to biodiversity. Biodiversity is like the immune system of the planet. It's like our body's immune system, just like our gut. And the gut bacteria keeps us alive. Biodiversity is what's keeping this biosphere alive. Climate change is actually a disease caused by the kind of crash that we've seen in nature and biodiversity around us. So if we don't start seeing this as a real problem, and if we don't look at it as a priority, we're always going to struggle to find the money.
I think adding on to that, what Swati was saying in terms of, the flash floods she's seen and the landslides, typically the response of the government, and not going into the politics of parties here, but should have been actually holding back, rethinking the entire project and working on it from, the scratch again, not holding back the news and preventing news outlets from reporting on something like a Zoshimart and keeping on the construction going. I think that is very important. Also, what is going to be very important in terms of investment, like I said, for example, bringing this into a formal syllabus may not really cost us much, but the modes and mediums of education, for example, be it popular culture, be it songs, be it, commercial film, it shouldn't be a preachy film, but someone like David Attenborough speaking, or, like how we had, like the movie I mentioned, The Day After Tomorrow. If you bring this into the mainstream and invest in these things, I think it's going to weave itself into the culture and the fabric of our thinking. It may not be a very popular opinion, but I've seen around the world, wherever you have zoos with a better culture of ex situ conservation happening, you have little kids actually going to the zoos, thronging them, and learning about the habitats, learning about the creatures in the zoo, sort of building this affinity towards nature. So I think it's very crucial for us to think in a very sensible way and where we invest. Formal education, informal education. One of the things she mentioned was about sports. Right now, a simple thing where you're building a sports stadium, why not create a rainwater holding pond, a rainwater, even you have groundwater building resources. You have ways where you can have drip irrigation in there. So you have rainwater percolation pits, you have rainwater holding ponds, you have drip irrigation. You also have, fertilizers that are green. I believe every bit of us, be it architecture, be it interiors, be it every step of our life, we can weave in climate change and, build it up with nature or biodiversity. I think that is very, very crucial for us to think today. That's where the investments will come in.
Just one very brief thing.
Yes, please, Rahul. I would like to invite you to speak. Yeah, share your thoughts.
Of course, extremely complex when it comes to funding. One is about funding for education. And if we're talking about funding for climate education, we have to put it in the umbrella of how much funding is coming as a proportion of the budget for research, education, and then climate education, right? So anyway, start looking across the world, it's not that education is being funded very majorly in most countries. So a lot of it is raised by private money too. Now, where do you go for private money, and what private money is acceptable to you if the big money is going to come from the polluters? So it's a very complex one. The other one, which, I think the debates have gone on and the answers have gone in that direction, is also a very complex subject about development versus environmental protectionism, right? And of course, we would like to be on the side of making sure that is, and I don't think there is an answer, right? Or a straight answer, which in a panel discussion or in 2 minutes one could give. Given that the priorities of whoever might be the state or even you as an individual might well be lifting people out of poverty versus protectionism at this point in time, right? So tough ones, but I think in any case, I think if we start the education, so at least, if it infiltrates through the next generation of leaders or this generation of leaders or those who are coming up with scientific breakthroughs to alleviate these problems, I think that might be one way to think about it. The funding just complicates it far more. And you might say that funding from state is okay. Right? Where is the state getting that funding from? If it's taxpayer money, fine, right? So very tough ones. I'll just leave it at that because it might be a hot potato.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's lovely to see that we're trying to untangle some of these deeper and interrelated issues. Part of the climate crisis. I know we've got loads of questions, but we'll have to wrap it up. And we have one last question for all the panelists. We'd like for you to share what is your hope for the network, the climate network that we're launching today, in terms of the next steps. So maybe we can start with Ms. Thiyagarajan, and then everyone can share, and then we'll wrap it up there. Thank you.
I think in terms of the Climate Education Network, firstly, congratulations. It's a great initiative and it's set up, and I'm glad that the website's gone live. That's terrific. I think the hope is really just, as you're calling it, rightly so, a network, getting people from like multidisciplinary across the board, because you need that kind of, and that's what, and as Rahul, it's very complicated, and you need that kind of thinking to like come together. So not just conservation organizations or people in the climate change sphere or people working in, I guess, not-for-profit or NGOs that have to do with the environment and wildlife, et cetera, but literally a multidisciplinary kind of network where you can draw on the expertise of people in pretty much every field, so that holistic solution looked at and to see where are the parallels, where are the confluences, where do all things meet? Because I think if you want then for this network to sort of be the resource and a space from where either information is disseminated or people can come to this network for open access to a lot of information. And if it's going to be a massive resource for the education network, then you want people to be able to look at information and go, that's how it affects me today in my life and my world. So if I'm making 5 decisions today, are 3 of them at least being informed, or is it going to change my choice? Or how is it that thing that I'm doing is actually affecting something around me? To make those kind of connections. So there's like a clearer picture of what it is that we need to do, and also what it is that as voting public, as people with money power and wallets in our hands, what can we do to put pressure on policymakers and companies and, to change the way things are happening? Because even that, we need enough information to be able to make those informed choices.
Yeah, Rahul, may I invite you to respond to the same question?
I think, I think fundamentally, if this network can grow in such a way that the participants feel empowered, and empowered to do what, right? To become content creators, to tell us their stories. As educators, our role we have limited to saying we are in the education domain. So whether we can start to build resources which reflect the local, right? Impacts at the local level, solutions at the local level. So I think in one of the previous questions where they asked something about the formal and the informal, there's a wealth of information. I think Mr. Thackeray also talked about the wealth of information is there. It has never reached even you and me, right? So if the person in the rural area has his or her stories, and they have their way of dealing with stuff, by all means, it has to come into the mainstream education, or at least in the education system which is in that location. So I feel, the textbooks that I grew up with or you grew up with, we're done with old white men, right? But unfortunately, that's what has become or considered quality, right? Where we have to flip that script of saying, yes, you can get the scientific quality from whatever is globally acceptable, white or not, or global north or not. But to make it contextual, and the information is out there, we need to document it. So documentary filmmakers and also we use this as our educational tools, right? Whether it's a hip hop song or it's a game or it's a documentary film or whatever. Now, how about but these are all voices which are out there in the digital domain, easy for us to access in our language of search, which is English. Now, how about doing something which is reflecting the local with the scientific know-how? I think that's a very tough one. I'm going to, of course, put it on you. Of course, I'm part of your network. So I think we have to address this. We'll plow through it. It'll be tough, but why not us, right? So yeah, a flip of what the next gen of textbook should be. And I think it's okay for us to go digital and think in those terms, but it has to be documented on the ground, which is a real tough thing.
Yeah, thanks Rahul for sharing that. Mr. Thackeray, your closing thoughts on this?
Firstly, congratulations on launching the website today. I think it's the beginning of a very wonderful journey for all the educators and a huge network that you can create. I think everyone agrees we need to have a bank of resources or knowledge that is constantly being updated and is also relevant to our times and our needs today. If you can put together all the thought processes, can join in as many schools, colleges, academies, thought leaders into this, and sort of create something where for each and every year we have some recognition to the people who are working on this. For example, like you have the Earthshot prizes, or you have what C40 did today, I think last week with Minecraft, they created a game with building sustainable cities. I think it should be a bank of educators that can also look into of course, formal education, which is in schools and colleges, but two, be a resource board for policymakers, for corporates to actually bounce back some ideas, be it like an echo chamber, whether, try to see whether research papers on, you need to work on these batteries or that batteries, what is good for our city, what may be harmful for our city, things like that. And even for a simple thing like afforestation in a city, some plants are actually native plants, some are not, some are colonial plants or trees that have been existing in our city, some are the ones that actually hold stronger in our storms, some fall over easily. As simple as that, to complex issues of be it lead batteries or sodium batteries or lithium ion batteries. I think if we can create a resource base where policymakers can actually ask and bounce back an idea saying, look, this is my problem, this is what I want to solve, can you sort of assist me with this? And you can guide them to the best educators or best academicians who have some good resource bank of that. I think that will be a beautiful way of going forward. And that is what I hope that will be, the banyan tree of really this knowledge base that you are creating today and what we're starting off with today.
Thank you, Mr. Thackeray, and thank you to all the panelists who've stuck around and answered these questions and inspired some very interesting thoughts for all of us to reflect upon and take back. And thank you to all the attendees who've stuck around. We are at the end of the launch. I think the links have been shared in the chat box, so please do check out the website. We also have a fairly active LinkedIn group, so please join us there and feel free to reach out to us. Let me hand it over to Jayanti to give us the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Jay. I am actually almost speechless, and my heart is full of gratitude, admiration. It's almost like a dream come true today. And this whole virtual space is, vibrating with enthusiasm and discussion, fruitful discussion on climate education and climate as a problem as such. So on the behalf of Climate Educators Network, I would like to extend these thanks to different people and organizations. First, starting with our partner, our speakers, distinguished speakers. Thank you so much all for coming here today, Mr. Thackeray, Ms. Thiyagarajan, and Rahul Chopra, to share your insightful opinions, give us this kind of encouragement, and to be here today itself says that how important this issue is and how committed one should be towards climate and environment education, right? Thank you so much again for coming here today and making it worthwhile. I would definitely like to thank the participants today who are here. It was flowing with energy, a lot of interesting questions, although we are extremely sorry that we could not address all the questions here, but we were able to listen to all the panelists properly. So thanks for coming here. Your presence here today signifies that the commitment to the cause of climate education, and we are honored that you are here as a part of this momentous event. My heartiest thanks to Azim Premji University for providing a constant support platform during the initial days, of which I am also a part of. I want to express my gratitude and thanks to our partners, particularly ASAR. Without ASAR's help, nothing, this evening wouldn't have been possible. Thank you for extending your support and to take ahead this initiative. Vinita Gopal and her team, we thank you so much today for making this happen. Without your help, this wouldn't have happened. Particularly my thanks to Pallavi, Arjun, Maithili, Karishma, Nimi, and definitely the website team with Bhavik and his team for continuous bothering and iterations of the website. It took so long discussions. Thank you all for that. Although Rahul and Abhay Raj Nayak, they are our anchoring partners, but I would definitely like to thank them. I like to thank Initiative for Climate Action and Abhay Raj Nayak for his continued support and engagement. Thanks to Rahul and Tropicsu, and also to Flame University to be a part of this network. I would definitely also like to thank Pune Climate Warriors and the Eco Network who have joined our hands recently to take this journey ahead with us. So with this, I would also like to thank you all once again to join us here today. One thing to keep in mind before leaving is that we are saying Climate Educators Network. It's actually the network for all of us, right? So let's take an example. Someone had put a question here saying, what can we do to educate the Sarpanch? So one thing to keep in mind is if you have some ideas to how to educate the Sarpanch, come forward, contact us, become a member of us. This network is also for you. And you can develop a module for how to train Sarpanch. And we can incorporate that and spread that word around, not only in English, but all native languages, right? That is the purpose. That is the why we want to work as a facilitator of this network. For example, Mr. Thackeray, his connections with the politicians are there. If some team can come up, we know how to train the politicians in that matter, and they can contact us with that, so we can facilitate that. So CEN is for all, not just for us. So be a part of it, join hands with us, and let's take this forward. Thank you.
Jayanti ji, training politicians is a huge challenge you're taking up, huh?
You are taking.
Jayanti, just want to mention, sorry, before we close, I just want to take this opportunity to just thank all our panelists once again. This is from Asar's side. Thank you so much, Mr. Aaditya Thackeray, for making so much time on a weekday evening. Want to thank KK Shailaja as well, who had to unfortunately leave because she was called by the minister, and Mr. Sam Pitroda, who also had to leave. And of course, thank you so much, Rahul. Of course, you're part of the network, but it was really nice to have you speak about Tropicsu that clearly. So thanks everyone once again, and all the participants who stayed on till the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Please check out the website.